Hello, everyone. Welcome. We are just getting started. So this is 5 minutes before start time. We are starting at 11 a.m. Pacific. So I'm going to let you guys start trickling into the room and just enjoy some music while you wait. Hi, Liz. Where are you tuning in from? I'd love to know. Hello. Welcome to our Masterclass, Parents' Guide to Dyslexia and Reading Troubles. Although I know a few of you aren't actually parents, a few of you are fellow educators, who I'm glad that you are here to join us too. I'm going to give us just a couple of minutes for us to get a few more people in the room. We had more people registered than are currently logged in, so I thought I would give everyone a minute. In the meantime, I would love to learn where you're tuning in from. So if you could put a comment in the chat and let us know where you are coming from. This is the second time I'm doing this masterclass this week, and last time we actually had someone all the way from France, which for me in California, that's awfully far away. So I would love to know where you're coming from and also how you found this masterclass. I know I sent out a few different messages and I also have the podcast, so I would love to know where you heard about it as well. All right, we'll give it one more minute and then we will get started with our masterclass. Great, Liz, welcome. Petaluma not too far away at all. About 30 more seconds and we'll get started. A few people are still joining into the room right now. Let me know how your day is going. I had a bit of a busy start. I drove to my little tiny cabin in the woods to do this event so that I can actually look out at the trees at the peaceful snow while I chat with all of you guys today. All right, we are going to go ahead and get started. Oh, somebody else just popped in. Hello, welcome. Hi, Kathy. So glad that you are here. We are just getting started. We are waiting for a few people to trickle in, so you're right on time. The first question to pop into the chat is where you are tuning in from today and how you heard about this masterclass. Ginger, welcome. Nice to see a familiar face. Well, technically a familiar name because I can't see your faces. Don't worry, only I'm being recorded today, not you guys. Okay, let's go ahead and get started because I know you guys have meaningful time and I don't want to waste any of it. So I'm popping a little question in the poll. If you can you answer, how much do you feel like you know about dyslexia? It should be near where you guys are looking at the chat. Give me an answer of how much do you feel like you know about dyslexia? I already got a couple answers in. Just a little. That is the overwhelming 100% answer, is that all of you feel like you know just a little bit about dyslexia. Well, then you are in the perfect place. So I'm so glad that you are here today. All right. So to kick us off, I'm going to show you how kids with dyslexia and reading troubles can learn to read and succeed, because really that's what we all want, right? Every person has the right to read. And so we want to see how we can help everybody get there. So as a special bonus, if you stay to the end, there's an extra special opportunity at the end of this class if you decide to take the next steps to continue your work with me. And there's also going to be a Q&A session at the end of this. So make sure as questions come up, don't feel like you have to hold them in your head, because I don't know about you, but I would forget it 30 minutes later. So pop the questions you have into the chat and I will answer them all at the Q&A session. Or if they are super on target with what I'm already talking about, I'll answer them in the moment as well. So don't wait to put your questions in just because the Q&A session is at the end. Kathy, welcome from Pacific Prep. I know all about your guys' program. Fantastic. Try to eliminate your distractions, so closing out any emails you might be tempted to answer and any extra distracting tabs, because you really get the most out of something when you're paying full attention to it. And I promise not to waste your time. When I did this earlier this week, everyone's questions got answered and we were still done in under an hour. So don't worry. Grab a paper if you need some notes. So what I would like for you to do right now is brainstorm in the chat. What is the first thing you think of when you think of dyslexia? Put it in the comments. What comes to mind if someone says dyslexia? We've got a few more people joining us. If you're one of those people just coming in, tell us what comes to mind when you think of dyslexia, because that's your current task. But also, we would love to know where you're tuning in from and also how you heard about this masterclass. If you missed it last week, last session, there was someone all the way from France, and I believe someone registered all the way from Ireland today. So fantastic. I would absolutely love to know how the people from Europe found me. Well, Ginger, I know how you found me. IEP paperwork. Yes, Kathy. We all think about IEP paperwork more than we would like to. Trouble reading. Yep. All righty. Let's keep going. You are in the right place if you are curious and want to learn more about dyslexia. You're in the right place if you want to gain some understanding. So maybe you know a little bit about it, but you don't really quite understand it. You're also in the right place if you're worried about somebody in your life that has dyslexia or troubles with reading, and you want to know how to help them. You are also in the right place if you want to help, because I know some of you guys who registered are actually educators, or you could be parents as well. And so if you want to help somebody with dyslexia, you are also in the right place. So tell me, Emily, let's check your answer. Dyslexia, trouble reading, heard about me from searching the podcast on dyslexia, and a daughter with new diagnosis. Welcome, Emily. You are in the perfect spot. I've got all sorts of good stuff for you today. So tell me in the chat, which person are you? I gave 4 options, but if you have a totally different reason, you're welcome to answer. Emily, your answer might already cover it. So tell me, what brought you to today? Are you curious? Do you want to gain some more understanding? Are you worried? Pop those answers in the chat. Want to help? Kathy, that's so important, especially with the job that you have. Fantastic. Ginger, fair worry. But your grandsons are doing awesome, by the way. A little tidbit for the rest of you guys. I already know Ginger and her amazing grandkids who have made fantastic progress with me this past year. So hip, hip, hooray. And Liz wants to help. Fantastic. We need more helpers in this universe. All righty, let's keep it going. So welcome. For whatever reason you are here, I am here to support you on your journey, whether that's as an educator or a parent or caring for a loved one. So you can find me all over the place. A lot of you found me from my podcast, but if you don't listen to that already, it's called Dyslexia Devoted, and you can find it everywhere. So Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen to a podcast, a few podcast things that I don't even know existed to carry podcasts, but they're there. On social media, you can find me at Parnello Education. All right, so a little about me. I am the CEO of Parnello Education Services, the host of the Dyslexia Devoted podcast, and I am a credentialed trainer that also trains educators to teach kids with dyslexia. So in addition to the dyslexia therapy work I do one-on-one with kids, I also continue my mission of helping more educators know how to help kids with dyslexia. So that's another aspect. And then I am also the former lower school director of Sand Hill School, which is a school for kids with dyslexia. And I actually ran the numbers this week because I was so curious, actually. I've officially helped 59 students with dyslexia therapy in my one-on-one work with my business in the last 6 years. But if I tried to count up the rest of the kids I work with, there's no way I could ever count them. Hundreds of kids in grades K-8 in 2 different states. And I help get them both as a classroom teacher, as well as I was a literacy specialist as well too. And then for the last 10 years, I've also been doing parent and educator trainings like this one. Although this one is actually the first one for my own business. I previously did it for Children's Health Council too. And I've also certified over 20 teachers to help kids with dyslexia using Wilson Reading System. There's many other programs. I'm not saying that's the only one. It's just the one that I'm the expert in. And I've trained teachers because that's what's so important, is to have more teachers that know how to help kids with dyslexia, because so many of us never learned it in college. I got 2 degrees and certifications in education and never learned how to teach a kid with dyslexia until I learned through extra training after all of that. And I also had the privilege of being featured in Distinct magazine, which is all about dyslexia. So you should check it out. You can actually literally check it out on the Libby app, which is the library checkout app. And you can get digital books and things like that through Libby. And so you can get it for free there on that way too. Okay, so know the facts. Did you know that 95 to 97% of all kids can learn to read? Dyslexia usually isn't a problem with learning. It's a problem with how the child is being taught. Because like I said a minute ago, most of us didn't learn it in teacher school. And many of the curriculums in our schools these days don't help kids with dyslexia. So we really want to learn a little bit more about what does help. Can you imagine what it would feel like to see the child in your life succeeding in reading, school, and in life? Understanding dyslexia is the first step to a successful future. And what would be easier if you knew how to help a child with reading troubles? I'd love to know. That was an actual question, not rhetorical. So if you pop it in the chat, I would love to know. I always think about things like homework because a lot of times they are battles for kids with dyslexia because it's so challenging for them. So think about what would be so much easier, class time. And let's take a peek at our roadmap for today's class. So first we've got our intro, which is what we are doing right now. Then we will have the 3 keys to success with dyslexia. I'll tell you what those are in a minute. And then we will talk about Discovering Dyslexia, a new opportunity I created for you guys. And then we will have our Q&A time. So like I said earlier, don't forget you can put questions whenever you want, and I will come back to them for the Q&A time, or possibly answer a few of them in the moment as well. So let's talk about what are the 3 keys to success with dyslexia. The first key is understanding what dyslexia is, what causes it, and why does it make learning so much more difficult. The second key is having instructional strategies that work. Find out why the current instruction doesn't work in a lot of schools, especially for kids with dyslexia. And then the third key is to identify accommodations that work because we want to work smarter, not harder. Even after a child or grown-up with dyslexia learns how to read, they may always need accommodations because they shouldn't have to work twice as hard forever for the rest of their life. So it's really about knowing all 3 keys to unlock the magic of reading and a successful future. So let's pop into that first key. Understand dyslexia. You have to understand the cause in order to find a solution. When kids are having trouble with reading, there's 2 possible answers. It could be because they're learning how to read, they can't read the words, or they're having trouble understanding. Most of what I'm talking to you about today is having trouble learning how to read. Because most of the kids who have trouble with understanding, it usually is a matter of they really aren't reading as well as you think they are, and they're having to work so hard at the reading that even if they read the words, their brain was so focused on the words, they couldn't focus on the meaning. Or it's because they have poor vocabulary. And occasionally I've seen kids with autism where they don't understand the stories because they don't understand social interactions in life. So then when you put it in a book, it's even harder. So that is one other third reason I've seen that kids struggle with comprehension. But a lot of times it really comes down to the reading itself. They may look like they're reading, but they might be doing a lot of guessing or they might be struggling through it so that by the time they get to the bottom, they don't remember what the top said. So let's talk about why dyslexia exists in the first place. Speaking is a completely natural event. The people and creatures of the universe naturally can want to communicate. So whether it's a bird in the trees or my dog outside talking to the neighbor next door, it is one of those things that creatures naturally can converse with each other and have some form of communication. But reading and writing are not natural. People created them as a way of keeping records and spreading knowledge and maintaining understanding of something they learned before so they don't have to quite literally reinvent the wheel. So we developed over time to learn how to read and write. But the thing is, not everybody's brain made that adaptation. Not everybody easily is able to read and write because it is not a natural event and evolution takes a really long time. So when we think about our little animal brains and how natural it is to communicate, we also have to think about how our brain processes information that it visually takes in. So if you go to look at a tree, if I'm looking straight on at a tree right outside my window, or if I'm looking up at the trees, which by the way I find very relaxing, or if I'm looking down on it from a plane or I see a one fallen over, I still know that it's a tree. No matter if it's a different kind of tree or a different size of tree or direction I'm pointing, it is still a tree. But then what happens when you use letters? You flip them over, you turn them around, you go the other direction. Suddenly that thing that was always a thing, no matter which direction you look at it, now direction matters and it can mean something completely different. You call it something different, it sounds different when you try to read it, it looks visually very similar, but yet you're telling me it means something completely different. This is what happens when someone has dyslexia. And it's not that the letters flip and move on a page. They don't actually move. Dyslexia is not a vision problem. It's a processing problem with understanding how the language works when you put it on paper, or even off of paper. Dyslexia is far beyond the written word. There are so many characteristics of it having nothing to do with words on a paper. We'll get there, don't worry. Our brains, we have the left brain and we have the right brain. And I've had the lovely privilege of getting to go to UCSF and their Dyslexia Center and learning more about their fMRIs, meaning the functional MRIs, that they can actually see what part of the brain is lighting up when somebody learns to read and as they're reading, whether that is a fluent reader or a dyslexic reader. So let's talk about the brain in general. The left side of the brain is generally associated with language, logic, critical thinking, numbers, reasoning, rationality, precision, and reality. The right side is more commonly observed with observation, expression, creation, imagination, creative thinking, intuition, appreciation, and reading emotions. Now, what happens with dyslexia is all these things on the right are being used to read, when it should have been all the things on the left. And this isn't necessarily always a bad thing. While it does cause troubles with reading, it also can create some amazing successes. Off of the very top of my head, I can think of at least 6 of my clients whose parents are CEOs and founders of major companies. And they didn't all get referred by each other. They were all through separate means. And that's no coincidence. Dyslexia is thought to be hereditary, and all indications point to it happens at different levels. So just like people think about the autism spectrum, dyslexia also happens on a spectrum. So sometimes mom and dad may have just had struggles with spelling, but everything else was fine. But maybe some generation back, maybe when people were on a farm and no one really needed to read a lot, maybe that was the person that originally had dyslexia. And so being dyslexic isn't always a bad thing because they have all these other amazing strengths. And you find out about so many actors and people who run corporations who have dyslexia. And it's because they have that out of the box thinking and they look at more of the big ideas as opposed to the teeny tiny details, which is really helpful in life. But in school, not always so helpful. So let's talk about some of the characteristics of dyslexia. It also includes struggles with rhyming. So even before a child ever picks up a book, you can see some of the times that they will be more likely to have trouble reading, such as when they can't rhyme, or they'll say things like paschetti instead of spaghetti. And they have all these other struggles associated with hearing sounds within words, even before they pick up a book. They are slow to learn their letter names or their sounds, or both. Poor phonemic awareness, and that's the ability to know that if I hear the word sprint, it's not just sprint, there's little sounds within it. S, p, r, I, n, t, sprint. And they can't isolate each of those individual sounds. And they struggle with that, which causes trouble with spelling because they don't hear all the sounds. Therefore, when they go to write it down on paper, some of those sounds are missing. There's no letters to represent them. And of course, slow labored reading. You already knew that one. Some other characteristics are poor organization and time management. The kid who loses their folder, forgot their backpack, left their water bottle out on the lunch table. Executive functioning is part of dyslexia for many students. And oftentimes, kids with dyslexia also have ADHD. There's a much higher incidence of it. And ADHD also struggles with executive functioning. So these kids might be bursting full of energy and ideas, but their organization, not so great. They also have trouble with difficulty learning math facts. Math facts require you to have rapid automatic naming of information in your head. Oftentimes, kids with dyslexia can't pull that information as quick as they would like to. They go, what's that, whatchamacallit, the thing? But they can't quite get the right word out. Dyslexia is a language-based problem, which means even in math, there's a language to math all its own. So kids struggle to pull out the information out of their brain. Their brains are taking a longer pathway to get to the information and pull it back out again. And they have a lot of trouble outside of reading class as well. You will often see they have trouble with some words, but no strategies on how to sound out others. And then they might also have some poor spelling, which is kind of a given. That is often one of the first indicators you see is when their spelling might actually be completely different throughout the page. For example, they can write the same word 3 times, 3 different ways, because no way looks right to them. They don't know how the word works. Now, in order to help a child, you have to find the source of the trouble. Is it a difficulty with reading the words? Is it the amount of work that it's taking that prevents them from understanding? Is it a problem with vocabulary knowledge that's now preventing comprehension? The answer to that question really will help determine what happens next. Let's go on to the roadmap. On our roadmap, we are now on to key number 2, discovering strategies. Not all teaching methods are creating equally. For reasons we've explored, children struggling to read aren't going to be helped by the one-size-fits-all approach that is typical in so many schools. Rather, we need teachers who are trained to use a toolbox of principles that they can apply to different types of children. That is by Marianne Wolf. And if you've ever heard her speak, boy, is she powerful to listen to. Her energy is infectious. She has many books on how to help kids with reading, and she's very heavy into dyslexia advocacy and into the research behind the science of reading, which is so important that we spread the word on. So the first thing we have to look at when a child is struggling to read is how are they being taught? Because teachers don't always know how to help a kid with dyslexia. It's not part of a lot of teaching programs. And at most schools, even if a teacher knows how to do certain things, a lot of times they're mandated and required to use the curriculum provided by the school. They do not have a choice in what curriculum they're using in the classroom. Although I've heard some teachers being sneaky and putting in some good science or reading strategies into poor curriculum. First question is, are they using leveled readers? The ones that are labeled from A to Z? I can't even tell you the number of times a parent says, the school says he went from book level C to book level F. Guess what? I don't care. Those levels mean nothing. The levels in the leveled readers are how simple the sentences are or how complex the sentences are. They have nothing to do with the spelling patterns and the writing on the page. Have you ever looked at the spelling patterns or the lack of one? You will find predictable sentences. I see the cat, I see the house, I see the hippopotamus. But have you ever tried giving those same words to the child without the pictures? If you handed them a book that had the word hippopotamus, could they really read that word if you took away the picture of the hippopotamus? Probably not. The strategies being used to teach are in schools all across America. In fact, 40% of schools in America use programs that don't work. They teach the kids how to look at the pictures, how to predict what word would make sense in the sentence, and how to guess, not how to sound out the words. Kids with dyslexia need strategies. They need to know how to sound out the words. They need to know why does it work the way that it does. Don't just tell me to copy it. The other day, I had a student sneak his homework into my office. You heard that right. He snuck it into his office. So I work with a kid every morning before he goes to school because the school doesn't provide services to help him. So he's allowed to come late because he comes to me instead. And when I'm working with him, we're supposed to do work that is, how to read. But then he started realizing I can explain his homework better than his teachers could. And then his mom said, no, you need to not waste your time with Lisa to do your homework. You need to be working with her to learn how to read. We're not doing that. So he literally snuck his folder in his jacket to bring it to show me. And it was because his homework requires him to copy the spelling word 3 times. Or the next day, use it in a sentence. Or the next day, put in alphabetical order. None of those things help that child with that spelling list. None of them teach them how to spell. All of those strategies teach that child how to try to memorize. And memorizing 13 words with a pattern you don't understand, it's never going to happen. He's never going to pass that spelling test. But he likes that when he comes to me, I explain to him how it works. I had another little boy that said, why is it when I come to you, you tell me why the letters work like that? Why doesn't my other teacher tell me that? Because teachers don't know. They're trying their best. They're doing what they were taught. They literally don't know any better. They've been told over and over that their methods work, and for a lot of kids it does. But for kids with dyslexia, it doesn't. If you take nothing out of this today, I beg of you, please listen to the Soul to Story podcast. It is done by an educational what do you call her? Author, researcher, reporter. That's the word I was looking for. And it is 6 episodes. That is it. And it will completely change the way you think about reading instruction. So for Sold a Story, it is now in your chat. It is one of those things that explains why kids are struggling so much to read in schools. It helps you understand why so many kids aren't making as much progress in reading as they could. Yes, Kathy, I'm so glad you've listened to it too. I am like shouting it from the rooftops to every parent and educator in the world that I can. And it's all stuff that I knew and understood because I've taught in schools. I taught in public school. I understood all of these things. It wasn't until we hit like episode 5 out of the 6 that I was like, oh my goodness. And I finally learned a couple of new things, or it actually helped me see the intertwined things about everything and how they all work together and how it all came to fruition, how it came to be. So please listen to that one. It will completely make you think differently about how our kids are taught to read or not taught to read very well. Even though educators are trying their absolute best, I can't say that enough. Teachers are going above and beyond these last few years. It's not their fault, but they need a better strategy and they need to know that one exists. So one thing that you must do is you must have a clear instruction on spelling patterns. I never give my kids spelling lists, but all of them can read and spell, or at least most of the time, by the time they're done with me. So kids need to know the pattern of how does it work. I don't need to know about this one word. I need to know a whole family of words that have this same pattern so that I can apply it to other words in the future. We need the students to recognize these patterns so that when they get into middle school and high school, when they're starting to read about things in science and history and things they've never heard of before, they can still sound out the words. A lot of times you will hear that students tend to fall off in reading from 3rd grade into 4th grade. Aside from the fact that it's learning to read then becomes reading to learn, also that's when all the pictures go away. Kids are expected to read books without pictures, but in grades K through 3, what strategy were they taught? To look at the pictures. So when there's no picture to look at, they can't read it anymore. So they need strategies on the patterns within the words so that no matter what they read about, they can read it. And they need to have tasks that focus on those spelling patterns, not memorization. For example, in the picture, you will see where it's going the shape of the letters. That teaches the kids to memorize what the letter looks like. Sometimes you will see a similar set of boxes that are usually all the same size. I believe they're called Elclon boxes. I can never pronounce it properly. It starts with an E. There's a K in there too. And in those ones, they teach them to put the sounds in the boxes. So you would think about it as more as k, a, p, and each sound goes in a box. Or like if it was the word bath, it would be b, a, th, and you would put 2 letters in the last box. These ones here, where it's just memorizing the shape of the letters, they seem helpful, but they're not really teaching why the word works the way it does. They're only teaching what it should look like so that you memorize it. Systematic phonics is really what kids with dyslexia need. They need skills that build upon each other, not random letter patterns, but ones that build on each other. Well, here's how we read it in cat. Now here's how we read catnip. And how do we apply these small strategies to big words? And then how do we break down larger words into smaller pieces? And if there isn't a clear structure and it's just random patterns, then it all falls apart. It's kind of like climbing a ladder with some rungs missing. Some important rungs are there, but what if there's this big gap in between? And then it all falls apart. So we really need the kids to know how to read by going step by step by step and building on what they've already learned and expanding their knowledge one pattern at a time. Another thing that's really important, which by the way, I was never taught in school, so I've actually had to learn it along with my clients when I'm doing it with the kids, which is morphology. And morphology matters so much. It is how vocabulary is built into reading. So when we talk, our conversations usually only use about 4,000 words of our language, which means most of our conversations are not how we learn our vocabulary. We learn most of our vocabulary through reading. But what happens if you have dyslexia and you hate reading? Unless you are around a very rich vocabulary environment with your family life, you do not get exposed to nearly as much rich vocabulary words, which puts you at a deficit. So one of the things I heavily emphasize in my time with the kids is working on morphology, which is the Greek and Latin roots of words, so that you know what a word means or pretty close to it, even if you've never heard of the word before. For example, I had a girl last week read the word geothermic, and I said, "What do you think that means?" She goes, "Something to do with the heat of the earth?" Because I taught her that geo has to do with the earth and thermic has to do with temperature. So even though she'd never heard of the word, she knew approximately what it meant. And that's what we need to teach our kids to do. We teach them to read by sounding out the words and learning the patterns, but also how to apply morphology and the roots of what they mean to understand what it means. So if it has the word has rupt within it, you can think about interrupt or eruption or interrupting or disrupt. If you know that rupt means to break into something or break out of something, then you have a better understanding of a whole new world of words just by knowing one little piece. One thing that is very helpful is to use decodable books. So this is my little take home for you today. So I'm going to put it in the chat. So first, I'm going to put up Flyleaf. So Flyleaf are decodable books that are actually totally free right now if you just want to use the digital ones. I spent the money and I went ahead and I got the ones to keep in my office that the kids can read. Ginger, these are the ones that your grandson borrowed yesterday. And so these ones, the kids can sound out every word and they go in order of patterns. And if you look on the back of the book, it'll actually show you which explicit patterns are in there. And then I'm going to share something else, which is High Noon books. And High Noon books are high interest, low reading level books. Those ones tend to work really good, especially if you have older kids who are struggling readers. And I haven't used them as much because I've just stuck to Flyleaf because it coordinates more with the program that I use to teach kids to read. The order goes in a better order for my specific needs. But High Noon, I've heard fabulous things from both the kids and the parents and other educators of the ones that have really interesting stories and don't feel so babyish for older kids, but who are still challenged to learn to read. All right, I need a sip of coffee. Okay, closing that one out. Now, continuing on our roadmap today. So we are on to key number 3 for success, which is utilizing accommodation. Learn to work harder, Learn to work smarter, not harder. Kids with dyslexia can learn to read, but sometimes some of them are always slower readers, or it takes them more mental effort. Even if they know what to do, it still takes them longer. And I teach the kids, I would rather you learn to read and practice those skills after I've taught you. But if you're tired and you're exhausted and it's going to take you 2 hours to do something and your classmates 20 minutes, listen to it. Listen to an audiobook. Use an accommodation, make your life easier. I want you to know how to use the skills, but I don't want you to torture yourself. Accommodations change how you do something, not what you're doing. Sometimes kids also need modifications, which is changing the actual assignment as they're making progress, but we're focusing on accommodations and crossing our fingers that kids are getting some great instruction and can utilize these. Although accommodations can be used at any phase, they can be used from the very get-go of a kid struggling to read so they can keep accessing their content. So let's look at some of the choices. One of the basic ones is extended time, because even if they can read it might take them longer to do it. Audiobooks, and I have some resources I'm going to put in the chat in just a minute so that you guys have some choices. And that is to be able to listen to audiobooks. A quiet space, so sometimes they need to focus, and if they hear one more sound, it throws them off and then they can't figure out where they were at. They might need more breaks, because if it takes more work, they need to learn how to stop, take a break before they hit a frustration point as they're getting a little extra tired, take a break and come right back to it. I have one kiddo who knows he has to read 20 minutes a day, but he breaks it up in 2 sets of 10. So he will read for 10 minutes, go play basketball, and come back and read for 10 more to do his 20 minutes worth of work. Because with his ADHD, sitting still for 20 minutes and actually learning anything from that last 10, not going to happen. So we've taught him how to utilize breaks and strategies to still get the work done, but break it up differently. Typing and spell check is another one. Sometimes kids with dysgraphia, meaning they have trouble with the actual physical act of writing, do much better if they can do typing. And spell check is always really important, because even once they learn the strategies, sometimes there's not really a clear reason why we need an AI versus an A with a silent E at the end. Yes, there are reasons if you go into like the etymology and the research of words, but like basic things that a 12-year-old would know on the top of their head, there's no reason they would know one over the other sometimes. So spell check is always really essential. And then breaking larger assignments into manageable chunks. So if a big essay is due on Friday, don't just say big essay due Friday. Instead, it's Monday, I want you to do your intro paragraph. Tuesday, do paragraph 2 and tell me your first point. Wednesday, let's do paragraph 3 and tell me, what is the second point that you're trying to prove in your essay. So breaking up really big assignments into smaller, more meaningful pieces is absolutely essential to get quality work done, rather than them feeling so overwhelmed that there's so much to get finished. All right, so these are my favorite audiobook accommodations. I'm putting in the chat a Google Doc that has links to all of these for you. So looking at my favorite audiobook options, first is Kindle Unlimited. This is actually one that I use all the time. So Kindle Unlimited is better for like fun books to just get to pick random ones. It is one low monthly fee. I want to say it's like $8.99 a month. I don't remember. I've decided long ago is well worth it for me because I listen to them in the car all the time. And you can actually, when I said listen, notice that. So Kindle Unlimited is for regular books, but also they have ones that you can read and listen to. So you can actually listen to Kindle Unlimited books on Audible. So I can listen to many of the books over on my Audible app while I'm commuting back and forth to work. And I'm going to close the link so that I can read the rest of my screen. There's also Audible, which is on all of the major books. So a lot of times kids will need Audible if they are for assignments because you really don't get to choose which books you read for homework. And so Audible is a great option for that. And they have really good narration. One that you can often get for free through schools is Learning Ally. If you have dyslexia, a lot of times the schools can submit certain paperwork for you in order to get Learning Ally for free. And one thing that I like about that one is it'll highlight the words for the kids so they can read along with it as they listen. Another one is Bookshare. The kids I work with don't tend to love it as much, but sometimes it's the only option some schools will give. Some schools don't want to pay the money for Learning Ally because it is more expensive, which, by the way, if the school doesn't offer it, you can pay for Learning Ally as a membership anyway. Bookshare is a good option if it's the only one you have. A lot of times the kids I work with don't love that one quite as much. There are also some Chrome extensions that are some options. One of which is Speechify, which is developed by a dyslexic. How great is that? You can actually take a picture of printed pieces of paper with the app. It'll give you a human-like voice to read the paper to you. And it is also available as a Chrome browser extension. So look at that, a dyslexic kid being creative and finding solutions for not just him, but for other people across the world. And then another one is Google Read and Write, which is another Chrome browser extension. Now let's talk about the spelling options. So Grammarly, I'm obsessed with. I actually had my entire team when I was working at the school. We all had Grammarly on our computers because it made it so that it could catch any errors before we sent it out, because we would be doing 35 IEP reports, or at least our version of an IEP. And by the time you get to that 35th one, your brain is turning to mush. And so Grammarly will tell you not just that you made a spelling mistake, but it'll tell you why. If you do an error in like the versions of there, like there, and there, it'll tell you if you use the wrong version of it. And it'll also give you a reason for the mistake. So I love that it teaches the kids why it's a problem so that they can learn from it. It doesn't just fix it for them. Because like on an iPad and things like that, autocorrect will just fix it for them and they never even knew that it happened. Versus on Grammarly, it highlights it and gives them like a little like lesson, so to speak, that pops up and tells them why that was a mistake. Another one is Otter.ai, which has really strong voice recognition. It's what I often use for the podcasts that I'm totally behind on and I need to go back and add them, which is for transcripts. And it'll very accurately actually transcribe whatever is being said. Sometimes the built-in native softwares for computers are not super excellent at catching words and they misunderstand what you said. And Otter has pretty amazing software and I found it works fairly well. There's very few things, unless it's like my own last name and it doesn't know how to spell it. But most of the time it gets a lot of stuff pretty great. All right, any questions on what we're doing so far? I don't see any waits and slowdowns in the chat, so I think we're doing okay. All right, let's move on to our Dyslexia Masterclass roadmap. Next up is Discovering Dyslexia. So now that you've learned a ton with me today, you have two choices, which is one is to continue on your own path and continue your journey with learning more about dyslexia or helping kids in your life. Another is to let me join you on your journey and help you out along the way. I created a course called Discovering Dyslexia, a parent's roadmap to navigating the first year. It is the only course, at least that I know of its kind, to ensure that it walks parents through the entire process from reading the first IEP diagnosis report to the IEP system, the accommodations, and finding the right instruction for your child. It consists of 5 modules. One is understanding the diagnosis and the assessment results. The second is going deeper into the tools and accommodations for success. The third is the IEP meeting process, which, if you've ever been through that, it's a lot. Fourth, we will talk about high quality reading instruction and what to look for, including what questions to ask. And then fifth, the last module, we will be talking all about your educational options because there is no one size fits all answer. There's a lot of options and choices to get support. And most people hadn't even thought of. And then in addition, there's also 2 live Q&A sessions, which is worth an additional $97. Now, I'm not the only dyslexia specialist. There are many experts in my field. I just have the roadmap for parents to follow the same path as others who've already faced this journey, and you're not in this alone. Like I said, I've done 59 families worth of dyslexia therapy. I've learned all of the possible options and troubles and roadblocks along the way, so I've learned to help navigate them a lot better. And then additionally, you get an extra bonus if you sign up for the course, which is my Dyslexia in Schools mini course, which has a $27 value. P.S. If you've already picked that up, there's actually a secret discount code at the end of that if you've bought it separately already. And if you're not sure if this course is for you, don't worry. It's got a 14-day money-back guarantee, so you can try those first 2 modules, and if you're not satisfied, you can have your money back. Now, what it's worth, the course is worth $497. The first bonus with those 2 live Q&A sessions is worth $97, and the Dyslexia in Schools mini course is worth $27, so a total of $621. But the Discovering Dyslexia course with all of those bonuses is actually only $197 to walk you through the whole process. And there's also different options. I also added a VIP extra if you wanted one-on-one time with me. There's an hour of personalized support, or there's different payment options as well. I'm going to put the link in the chat if you were interested in it. Or it's also on my website at parnelloeducation.com/courses. And there is also an added bonus that I talked to you about earlier today when you first checked out this masterclass, which is that if you sign up for that course while we are on this Q&A session as we're ending out today, then you also get a bonus mini VIP of a 30-minute one-on-one with me to do whatever extra support you might need after this course gets started. And so you get a free bonus 30-minute session with me, which is pretty awesome. I know so many families have questions that are more nuanced about their specific kid. It's a great option. And so in order to register for it, if you go to my website, you have to go to the courses tab and click on the image of it. And when you get to the sales page, it'll have the first one. It says, lead the way, I'm ready. That one only gives you the full price option. And if you scroll down further, you will see the choices if you want like payment plans or anything like that to make it easier. And so don't forget, you get that extra 30-minute session with me if you purchase it while we're still on this live today. All right, so now it is Q&A time. Now it is time for you guys to ask all of your questions. So I would love to hear what you are wondering. What questions do you still have? I'm going to turn off the slides for a second. Baby, if I can remember how to close it out. So what questions do you guys have? I'm here for you. No questions? Was I really that thorough? You guys have no questions? Thanks, Kathy. And as you guys are going through, if you are about to hop off, I forgot to share one other slide with you. Thank you for being here. And I'll keep waiting for questions to come through. I'm not rushing any of you out. So next steps, you can listen to the Dyslexia Devoted podcast. You can register for this Discovering Dyslexia course, or it'd mean the world to me if you share this with a friend. I'm doing this one more time next Friday. If you would like to share this with somebody else that you know who might be interested, I'm going to be doing a live masterclass so that next time you can actually learn a little bit more if you missed it, or if you think you enjoyed it and you think a friend would really like it next week. And then remember, I'm also recording this to send to everybody, so that way if you register for it but you can't make it live, then it'll still get sent to your inbox with a bit of a replay. Not a bit of a replay, a full replay. So perfect. No other questions? Oh, thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Emily. I'm so glad you came today. Repeat the class options again. Can you clarify the question? So the class options for when to attend next time, or for the options to register for the course? To register for the course, you can go to parnelloeducation.com and click on the courses tab. And I can go back to the slide that shows you all of the choices. Oops. So when you sign up for the course, I'm going to go back. Your choices are, you can sign up for the regular course plus an hour of one-on-one VIP time with me, which is $347. And so that way, if there's anything else that comes up in the course that is more personal to you and you don't want to do like in the live Q&A session, that's the extra option. There's also the one payment plan where you pay for it all at once and you get access to the course. And it's 6 weeks long with 5 modules with 2 live Q&A sessions with me that are automatically included for everybody. And then there's also 2 payment choices. You can either do $99 and pay it twice, or you can do 3 payments of $73. And I put the link in the tab and it's at parnelloeducation.com/courses is a quick way to get to it. Or I put the link should already be appearing where the chat box is. And then if you register while we are on the live, I'm not rushing you off, or even within the next few minutes after I log off, so don't stress out if it takes a minute to put information in. Then you also get a 30-minute free mini VIP of 30 minutes of one-on-one if you register while we're still live on the course today, or relatively close to it if I tend to close the box. Nine-year struggle sentences when wired. For those ones, those are ones that are actually more for Ginger's question, for the lovely little 9-year-old. For the ones with when caught and things like large, it's because that child is trying to sound out those words, and those words don't work as well for sounding out. So those ones I like to call heart words, and I will actually write them out and put a little heart on the part they have to know by heart and remember. And so those ones are often really tricky and just require some more memorization, which is not always ideal. In California English, when with that WH, we don't pronounce it any differently. Sometimes in British English, they will do when, and we don't talk like that. So we can't actually hear the difference between a W and a WH. One way that I teach it to the kids is that the WHs are used for questions and sounds. So who, what, when, where, why, all have WHs, and sounds like whoosh, whack, wham, whoop-pow, like things you see in comic strips. Those are often when we will see the WHs. So that is one trick on that one. And for leg, that's another one. It's also how we pronounce it. The kiddo is just going off of pronunciation. If you listen to the way we talk, each part of the country and the world has different dialects. So like the way I say leg, I say little egg. So it sounds like an A. And so that's why they're adding the silent E to the end to make the A say A, when really it's leg, but we don't always enunciate the sound. So sometimes it's more about pointing it out and giving more excuses to practice it. So if you can make it in games. So one of the games that some of the kids like to do is shaving cream on a table. Sometimes a picnic table outside is better, but you can hose it off. But then they can practice drawing it on the table. And if you can make it a little bit more fun, then sometimes that helps. Or you can do games with them. So like sometimes I'll play like snowman. So if they get it right, nothing happens. But if they get it wrong, it starts building a snowman. So it's more of a socially appropriate than hangman. And so it builds a little snowman with a little scarf and hands and things like that. So if you can play games where if they spell a word correctly, great. If they get it wrong, then you add a little piece to the little snowman and the game's over when they have like a full snowman built. That's another good one. Sentence construction in general, sometimes you could just have them go back and read it back to themselves and tap to see if it makes sense. The errors that you're noticing are actually really common errors. So the ones that you're seeing, it really just is time and practice. And sometimes I'll tell them to write the other spelling option, like on the word when, you could write it W-E-N and you can write it W-H-E-N. And sometimes if the kids see both of them next to each other, then they will recognize, oh, wait, that's not one I've ever seen in a book before. This one is. And so sometimes they have that visual cue. If you just write it one way, you're like, yeah, sure, that's right. But usually if the kids can write it twice, one on top of the other, they will notice which one looks visually discerning and they can tell a little bit better of like, oh, wait, that's one I've seen before. That one doesn't look like anything I've looked at in a book. But yes, there will always be certain ones that are really tricky. And a lot of times as they get going, they will get better and better the more books that they read and they start recognizing, wait a minute, some letters are missing here. And we can always add them into our sessions too. So I can utilize some of those to add it in and pick intentional sentences that practice some of these tricky high frequency words that have less common spelling patterns. Great. Any other questions, my friends? I still have 4 of you on here. So I think that must mean you're enjoying listening. Anybody else? Okay. So I'm going to show you the very last slide one more time. So now that we are about to wrap up here, thank you so much for coming. I'm glad that you came today. I hope you learned a lot. The lack of questions makes me think maybe I was pretty clear, which means I did part of my job right? I would love if you share it with a friend. If you don't already listen to the Dyslexia Devoted podcast. And also if you could share that too, that'd be fantastic because my job is really to help spread the word about dyslexia. And there's only so many students I can fit in my caseload. So if I can spread the word in other ways, like through the podcast, that makes my heart happy so that we can keep spreading the word. And let me know if you have any questions. Parnelloeducation.com is where you can find me. If you have any extra questions, there's a contact form on there and it shoots it straight to my inbox. And then that way I can answer any other questions that you have. Thank you so much for being here today. It has been such a pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your day and happy Friday. Bye, everyone.